So you are already on the score norming document. And so I'll go ahead and you can just add in what you had for percentage of students on task, and then the score of 1, 2, 3 for those other categories. You can delete that. That was for my own notes. And then we'll see where we are aligned and then misaligned.
Do we include the, like, I guess.
Include the what?
So I'm looking at the, like, pacing and urgency thing,
Mm-hmm.
and I was looking at, like, teachers executing correct structure, but also, like, there's the first day of school specifics,
Mm-hmm.
where I was looking at, like, plan in hand,
Yeah.
which is not a thing, right?
Right.
So, like, since that's just first day of school specifics, I don't include that. I'm just looking at right content, right time, and correct structure.
Yes, that works. And then like think about ways that he is building or not building that sense of urgency in class.
Yeah.
Through like timestamps, projecting a timer, like circulating, narrating, all of that also plays into that as well.
Yeah. As a side note, his projector is broken.
Okay.
Which is why nothing is projected.
That
today.
is helpful. Okay.
That's helpful. Now, ask him, you always have a slideshow. HDMI cord is broken, specifically, so nothing.
Okay. Love that. Great. Quick question about strong voice and what to do directions. Why NA versus a score?
So, like, there wasn't a space where he was giving directions fully.
Was there a space he should have been giving directions fully?
I think we missed it. Because, like, when I asked a couple kids what they were supposed to be doing, all of the kids could very clearly restate to me what they were supposed to be doing, where they were supposed to be pulling that information from, and how much work was expected of them.
Okay.
And so, like, it's clear that he gave what to do's, and, like, he had them written on the bottom of his board. I think we just missed them by, like, a minute or two.
I would push back. I think that there was an opportunity for when he was having like when he was like passing out the stuff and like kind of like naming what they were transitioning to or like what was coming. That's an opportunity for those what to do directions that I don't think he capitalized on. Yeah, and like strong voice similarly, like he was, speaking and like giving context. I think that that's the least of our sort of like where we should focus here.
Yeah.
I'd agree that it's about 70% fluctuated. Is that your average? Or would you, yeah, I would say it definitely dipped below that a couple of times, but.
There were moments where it was higher, there were moments where it was lower. I think it's probably like average, somewhere between 65, 70.
Yeah, I agree with that. We are aligned on pacing and urgency, teacher radar 100%, and routines and procedures. Just thinking about sort of like putting on the coaching hat. What is the specific evidence that you have to justify the ones on teacher radar and 100% and then routines and procedures?
Yeah, so I have like in my running thing, my running record, I have like There's Ozzy and Bruce who have both of their heads down. There's nothing on their papers. They're blank. I have like Marcus moving seats, which Dalton didn't notice until I told him, and is having like a loud off-task conversation that I can hear from across the room that isn't being caught. We had a couple kids like off-task in the front corner, and then while Marcus is over there on that side of the room, he's pulling 3 other people into this conversation, which was missed, and then there's a lot of hands that were going up that were also being missed. So not even just the off-task behaviors, but even things like kids raising hands for questions were being missed. And then after he did address Marcus, Marcus did not respond to that by getting back on task. He continued to be off task where he was and try to like argue back with that. There is a downside to the fact that Marcus is not on Dean's list, nor anything. But like that feedback wasn't given the first time, and then he didn't follow back up when Marcus didn't move until he was until we had the conversation to do so. And so those are my like things from my running record that pushed that score of a 1. And then my thing with the routines and procedures issue is the efficiency problem. I do not, and this is the same reason actually that I put the 2 with pacing and urgency, is that is not the appropriate structure for a minor summative graded rough draft that students are doing of a PBA.
Correct.
And so like the structure of a PBA rough draft and like that routine of writing is not being executed efficiently when students could be talking and having conversations and doing all these things.
Sorry, Matt, of how disjointed this is, I promise. Yo, why are so many of us still in the hall? Yo. Okay. Part 8 of this? I'm not actually entirely sure. We're really thriving here.
So like my issue with this is the way in which he's trying to set up that routine and structure of that lesson is not beneficial to students or to his classroom management.
Yeah.
Especially this is the first PBA it's the first time they're doing a rough draft. He has a peer feedback day built in.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing that tomorrow.
Got
so
it.
there's not an intentional point in letting kids talk now if
Mm-hmm.
they're gonna be reviewing each other's work tomorrow.
Yeah. And it's like I know that the wording for ARC 1 is different in the in Grow, excuse me, than it is on not Infinite Campus, than on the IR.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, you know, like it very much aligns to that high expectation section where like classroom setup and systems, and it's like, are the systems that he's using supporting and maximizing learning time? And so I think that that's like a big component, similar with pacing and urgency of like, is there downtime? Like, again, are we using every single instructional minute? And so, yeah, I think absolutely you're spot on. So with that, I also do just want to name, you know, you were real-time coaching, which I know that is I think that's one of our focus areas as well. You know, you were giving that real-time coaching, naming, doubling down on what, like we're focusing on as a school in terms of that teacher radar and response. I think my only push would be to like name those criteria for him and then have him like say it back. Be like, great, remind me, what are these things that we're looking for that you should do?
Mm-hmm.
And then that way, like he like can, you know, you can always refer to those criteria, and then you can continue to like use them every time. So if you have to model, that way he can be like, great, what were the 4 things you just saw? Boom, boom, boom.
Mm-hmm.
But you were like, these are things you've first time coached, I think 3 individual times through whisper coaching. So which was great. With all of that, where do you think the teacher gap is? And then how do you think that teacher gap contributes to the student gap?
So I think radar, although like, so I think radar, and that's been consistently a thing, although I think the fact that this routine is not well set up for success for him or them is a really large part of why his radar was struggling today.
Yeah.
You know? Like I think all the time about the fact that like when students are on computers, when students are doing X, Y, and Z, like those are things that are already harder to manage. But when kids are on computers, have headphones in, and can talk, like that management is really difficult for anybody.
Absolutely.
Let alone for somebody who's already struggling with radar.
Yeah, 100%.
Also curious as to why he chose that shift, because his lesson plan has them doing this silent and solo.
What do you think is the reason for the shift?
Because kids weren't being silent and solo, or asked, and he allowed, is my guess.
What's the impact of making that change because of students not complying? What's the impact on students, or even his classroom culture?
I mean, it just doesn't feel like any directive actually matters. Like any instruction is up for debate.
Yeah, I also think it's like, you know, it's the, like to put it bluntly, and then in this room, it's like, it is, you know, the racism of low expectations, right? Where it's like, I set this bar, you didn't hit it, or I didn't, you know, support you to hit it, so I'm just actually gonna lower it to make it easier for you, and also like easier for like just management's sake. And therefore it's not supporting students, right?
Right. I mean, like, I had a similar like moment where I pivoted today, but it was not to what students wanted to do. It was actually the opposite. But like, my students came in today without having read. Like 3 kids read out of a 36 kid class. And I was like, we cannot do the partner practice that we were planning to do because you haven't read. You can't analyze foils because you haven't read. And they were like, so we're not doing the packet. I was like, no, you are. You're doing it independently while you read. And they were like, that's hard. And I said, I know, you should have read. We can't skip the work because you didn't do the pre-work.
Correct. And
so like, I think that that's the way that shifts can happen, is like, I'm going to hold you to the same expectation. We're going to get to it differently.
Yep.
But with rationale. Right?
Yep. 100%. So then, with, you know, you've kind of identified 2 different sort of gaps. Like, one being the radar issues, and the other one being the routines that kind of lead to effectiveness of radar.
Yeah.
With that, what do you think his action step needs to be for you all to close that gap or to close those gaps?
I mean, I guess, like, thinking about it sequentially, first routines, right? Because if your routines are not supporting learning time in a structured classroom environment, then radar will always be harder to fix. So I think I would focus on routines and procedures first.
Okay.
And then radar second.
That sounds right to me. So what I'm going to have you do is go ahead and just take the next little bit, the next 2 minutes or so, write out what your action step is. You can write it on paper, you can write it on our doc, but go ahead and write what you think his action step should be, and then we'll take a look.
I had my little Get Better Faster thing and I left it in the workroom.
Ow.
I brought it.
He's like, I've got mine. It's in there somewhere.
It's like it's somewhere.
I was like, it's in there.
Like, things and procedures. Despite the fact that I've already written multiple action steps, I keep forgetting the wording of them.
Let me see.
Action step too large, and then everything else too small.
I was like, okay, great, cool. So questions.
Yeah.
So you say you're naming teacher will design and practice critical routines that maximize student learning. Is that, where do you imagine this action step specifically taking place?
So, like in a classroom or?
Well, so sorry, I meant where will you observe this? So is it in the classroom? Is it in like lesson planning? Where do you imagine, like, if you were to say, let me see, did you hit these 4 criteria or how many ever, that you would look for that?
I think both.
Okay.
right? Like, one, I think that, and I think necessarily both, when I'm looking at the fact that his lesson plan had them doing this silent and solo, which is the correct way to do that routine, and then in practice he didn't do it that way. And so I think necessarily both. But I think if he's walking through this in his plan, then like this can also be very clear for students. So like if I think of PBAs like projects, students should have action steps that they know, like these are the steps you need to take throughout today.
Yeah.
Criteria for success, etc. And then from that should be clear consequences for not following. And so I think like the what does each routine look like and mean should be in his lesson plan, but also like this is the first time they're doing a PBA rough draft. What that routine looks like should be in front of students.
Okay.
Right?
Yes. No. So you're spot on, and I think so you're spot on in terms of like where these different components live. And I think that there's a way to make that more sticky or actionable and specific, which I know I like use like 3 kind of generic words, but I'm gonna model what I mean, or show you what I mean. So whenever thinking about an action step for a teacher, like diagnosing kind of like where do we need to see them get better the quickest, there are kind of sort of 3 buckets that I think of when I'm doing this. One of them is like, what is the in-class action, or what is my in-class like look for? What is then my LP look for? So my lesson plan look for.
And this is what you would be doing while you are trying to diagnose, right?
Well, yeah, or like, yes. And then the last thing, which is like a little bit different, it's like, what is like my level of support?
Right.
Because the level of support that you're going to give is going to be, it will help determine what is the in-class action that you want to see and what is the LP look for. And a lot of times what I find is that I will, like, my level of support will normally be like working with them to like craft that LP look for.
Yeah. And
then that is then what informs that in-class action, and then that's where I normally try to ground their action step.
Okay.
And so when you're thinking of like this routine and procedure, first you named that his routines and procedures are impeding his ability to have effective radar, right? So what specifically about those routines and procedures make that harder?
They're very open-ended.
Be even more specific to what we just saw in there.
So
what's
like
happening?
allowing students to be consistently having conversations
Right.
and be on multiple websites.
Talking. Websites. Headphones.
Yeah. And like, I don't inherently disagree, and I think it's very common with the comp department for students to be able to listen to music while they write. But
it depends, and normally it comes after independent. Like Carolina, it's like they have like X amount of minutes of independent, and then she'll release them into headphones if they meet certain expectations.
okay.
That was kind of how I did it. I also then I think at one point was like no headphones at all. Like I was just like no, because you all spend too much time trying to find a song, all this other stuff. So I like moved away from it. Okay, so then thinking about sort of like what we had talked about last week about the specificity of the action steps. So you just named 3 things, we named 3 things that get in the way of his ability to utilize radar. Okay, so then if we're then thinking of the fix, so what is the like base skill we want him to improve on?
For the systems and routines. Executing systems that maximize student learning, I think.
So we want him to execute them.
Yeah, because his plan has the right system,
Okay.
but in class he doesn't.
Okay.
And now that can come from, like, whatever caused him to change his mind, or it can come from the fact that when I asked him, he admitted that he hasn't been putting out his lesson plans still, and so maybe he forgot
Okay.
that he wanted them to do it silent and solo.
Okay.
You know, like, I genuinely don't know which one is true, but he planned the right thing, he executed the wrong thing.
Okay. So execute routines and procedures that maximize learning time. So then what is that first step that you would want to see in the classroom that's showing that he is executing a routine and procedure that will maximize learning?
I think setting clear expectations for students.
Okay. So
that can come from clear what to do's and clear expectations, right?
okay. What does clear expectation mean?
Student volume, student engagement.
Okay. Volume, engagement. Okay. So then, with those clear expectations, so you just like named like engagement and volume, I'd be specific on that too. And like even say like where it's like we are silent and be like kids are silent. Like and it is like so it's like so execute routines and procedures that maximize learning by providing like clear what to do's. 2, setting clear expectations for volume, like silent, blah blah blah.
Right.
Because I think it's like providing clear. Yeah. So sorry. It's like stating that volume should be 0. Like stating students should be silent.
Yeah.
And independent, and then like 3 that like honestly students need to be in their own seat.
Yes.
Which we didn't name, but like I was like, oh no, that's
all
like
the kids on the floor.
All the kids on the floor.
Yeah.
And the student who I think was sitting in like the teacher desk at the front. Oh, what's her name? Madison. Yeah.
Yes.
Also, I have head to lunch duty in a second.
Yeah. For his plans, I think that like he needs to build those, and I was just trying to think. I don't think I'm in his Google Classrooms, and I should be. Because I want to see what his document looks like. You know?
Yeah. No. Have him add you to Google Classroom.
Because I know like one of the things that helps me reinforce those expectations, like so his projector's broken today, so we will ignore that. But one of the things that helps me reinforce expectations is that those directions are not only verbal and on the board projected, but they're also on the student document. Like right above my criteria for success. And so my directions don't have just what students are doing. It also has you're doing this silent and solo or you're doing this with partners. And that always reinforces things for kids.
Yep. No, I agree. So then this is in our last little bit. So you started to name like what the lesson plan look for is. And so, and I think it's similar to what y'all be doing. Like it needs to be that he's scripting out what this, like naming that vision for excellence and scripting it out. And in that way, and it's like you roll this out every single time the same way. And then your level of support is like you can either do that with him, or you know you like it's that real time feedback you all norming on those on like a code of like that wasn't clear, you need to do it again. Go ahead and take another at bat. I would actually just do it in Grow, and then I'll look at it, and then that way you can submit the observation. Because I'm gonna get it finished.
Sorry, we've had a very chaotic meeting. Action step. Okay. Teacher.
Focus just on the execution.
So just execute.
Because the design is going to be where you're supporting in his lesson plan.
Okay.
And so like that execution part is what you're going to be looking for in the class when you observe.
Okay. That maximize
camera and just sticking my tongue out at Katie. Yep. Again, you're welcome, Matt.
Player what to do.
Oops. No.
We might have to get him. And extension cord.
Great. Cool.
Or a power strip, you know?
Yep.
For such a computer heavy class.
Yep.
I didn't see one in there, and I'm remembering that I ordered mine last year.
Yep.
So I think he just needs one.
My only like push where I would say, so like include even more specificities at third bullet point for clear expectations for student engagement. Like, what does even that mean?
Yeah. Because like if I'm thinking of that, I'm thinking of a criteria for success and expectations around technology usage.
Yes, like I think it's like,
because when I was looking at kids' documents, it looked like they created their document instead of like there was one for